Hey guys, this is Goku, and on this channel we talk about poker and ideas that can improve your life. In this video I'm going to review the spot that we've been playing for the last couple of weeks. Cutoff open versus big blind call. We've played our 500 hands, and the overall EV loss that we finished with is minus 38 BBs per 100 hands. So not the best score. We were hoping for something more along the lines of minus 20 BBs of EV loss. Well, this basically means that if we were playing this solver and we played 500 hands on stakes of $1 and $2 big blinds, we would have lost how much? We would have lost 76 big blinds per $76 per 100 hands, so something like 350 over 500 hands. So not great, but fortunately real human beings are not machines, and they do not play anywhere near the GTO. I mean, regular players, not some of the best players in the world. But if we analyze our overall statistics, I think we improved a lot while we were going through this challenge. Our bet or raise is just, well, something like 18% higher than the solvers. Our check or call is it's like 18% lower. So we are basically something like 18% more aggressive than the GTO solver is. And we actually also should fold more. This is I think the biggest lesson we can take from this series, that we are not folding enough. And I think you're going to see this on those 8 hands that I've prepared. Those were the biggest EV loss hands. So let's take a look at these. I think this was the biggest one. We have ace king of spades on an ace queen 5 board. The villain checks to us. We bet 2 BBs, which is already not the ideal action. The ideal action, and played 98.61% of the time by the solver, is betting 5 to the pot of 6.5. Maybe we can make this dollars so it looks better. So yeah, we're betting 20 to the pot of 65, and the solver would actually play this only 1.3% of the time, and it's a little EV loss. It's not a lot, it's just 0.32. But let's see what happens next. The villain calls. Okay, well, maybe let's switch to BBs, because as we could see, that wasn't working properly. 8 of diamonds falls on the turn. The villain checks again to us, and our hero bets 3/4 of the pot. The solver recognizes this play as a good play. I mean, it's the reason why it's not an ideal action probably is that overbetting the pot here is 71% of the time of the strategy, and betting 3/4 is just 16% of the strategy. So the solver plays a mixed strategy here, but either betting 3/4 or overbetting the pot is fine. EV wise is the same EV basically. So here we do not make any big mistakes. Let's see what happens next. The villain calls, and there's a 7 of clubs on the river, and the villain now leads to us. Yeah, as we can see, the pot hasn't been adjusted, which is not great, because it should have been. We bet 7 here and we go called, so it's 14 plus 10.5. It's 24.5. The pot should say here, not 10.5, but 24.5. The villain leads for 6 BBs, so a quarter of the pot. And what do we do here? We raise to 26 BBs, so to a little less than the pot. And what does the GTO say? The GTO says this is an EV loss of 1.63 BBs and just 1% of the strategy. The ideal action here, and played 98% of the time, is just a call. So in a spot like that, we should really just call. We should not be raising this. And when you think about it, it really makes sense, because if we raise here, we reopen the betting, and what for? He's probably not calling with worse hands, and if he shoves, he may push us off the best hand, and usually he will be behind. So we really cannot call if he shoves, so why reopen the betting at all? So that's the first mistake. But when we do that, the villain actually shoves, and I called it here. Yep, and that was actually the bigger mistake of minus 12.34 big blinds. So the solver does call here 25.5% of the time and folds 74% of the time, but in general calling is minus 12.34 BB of EV loss, and it's really all because we raised this donk bet that he made on the river, which we really should not have done. Yeah, so that's the first hand, and it turns out the hero actually had 2 pairs, so we would have lost the spot. Okay, let's go to the next one. Pocket sixes on a 9-8-7 board. We get led into for 2 BBs. We call, which is the ideal action, so nothing bad so far. The pot is 10.5 BBs, and now the villain overbets the pot. We call again, which is again the ideal action. However, as you can see, the villain folds probably something like 25% or more, because I'm not sure if he's if he's re-raising, probably not. So he's folding 28% of the time, or 27. 37. But yeah, we've called this. Now we catch a 6 on the river. The villain bets 24 BBs. And we call. And calling here, this is actually quite of an interesting hand. Calling here is a 7.05 BB EV loss, and the solver only plays it 0.32% of the time. And the ideal action should be a fold. So in a spot like that, we should be folding 99.7% of the time. So in reality, we should not be calling this 3/4 bet ever with a set here. So I found that strange, because I thought this is actually a spot where we should call this 3/4 pot bet, because the flush is missed, we have a set, right? So we're only losing to any 10 or any 5, and that's pretty much it. But the villain probably has enough of those missed flush draws, or maybe 2 pair combos, or maybe even top pair combos, that it should make this call profitable. But well, the GTO says something else, and we actually would have won this. We won this hand, but it's quite a big EV loss calling here with our hand. Let's go to the next one. King Jack suited on a 7 Ace 7 with 2 spades. We have the spades, so that should be an interesting hand. We bet 2 big blinds to the pot of 6.5. That's the ideal action, so it's all good. We get raised to 8.5. I'm assuming we're gonna call this. Yep, we do call this, and this is again the ideal action. We have a 10 of diamonds on the turn. The villain checks. What do? We check here, which I really like, but as we can see, it is a slight EV loss, very, very small, and 24.5% of the strategy. So I would say it's a fine play, but in reality, a bet of a third of the pot seems like the ideal action from the GTO perspective. So let's see what happens next. There's an 8 of clubs on the river. The villain checks, and we check. Okay, now I see where's the problem in this hand. As you can see, checking behind here is a minus 9.5 BB of EV loss, and the solver only plays it 1% of the time, and 94.2% we should bet half pot here. And it really makes sense. I mean, we don't have much, we just have a missed flush draw, and we probably don't have enough to take the pot on showdown, so we should try and bluff at this pot, and this is probably a good hand to do it with. So that's why we should not be checking behind here ever. We should try and take a stab. And yeah, the villain actually shows 8-10 of spades, and maybe he would have folded to a half pot bet, maybe not, but still, if we bet this half pot bet, we probably get him off any pocket pair that he's holding. Maybe we can get him off of a week 8 or week 10. Yeah, and also, I guess if we bet on the stand instead of checking, this would also make it more easy to bluff him off on the river. Let's move on to the next one. We have pocket threes on 8 Ace 4 with 2 hearts. The villain checks to us, we check, and this is a very small EV loss, but the ideal action would be betting 2 here with our hand, and the solver would do that 80% of the time. Checking behind is just a 13.5% play, but that's still fine. We have a 4 of clubs on the turn, and now the villain overbets the pot. And do we call here? I am assuming we call here. Yeah, the solver actually folds 91.5% of the time here. So this is also worth noting about this spot, that we should not really be sticking up with pocket threes on a run out like this. It's totally fine to just fold them, and probably you will see in the next part of this hand that it really only created problems for us getting involved in this hand. and we could have just, exited the hand right now. We have a 7 of clubs on the river, and the villain bets 3/4 of the pot. And yeah, now we should definitely be folding. And I actually called this here, which now I can see is quite a stupid play. It's minus 7.65 of EV loss, and the solver almost never plays it. The solver folds 99.95% of the time. I guess, yeah, we're only bluff catching with our hand here, and what can we really be bluff catching with? I mean, against. We can only bluff catch a hand like hard draw that didn't catch a pair. And I assume there's not a whole lot of those hands in his range, so probably that's why the call here is just a terrible call. So it's worth keeping that in mind. Another spot, we have 8 jack of hearts on a 10 jack 8 with 2 spades. The villain checks. We bet 5. That's fine, but the GTO would actually prefer checking almost 70% of the time here, which is for me a little bit strange. I'm definitely not checking 2 pairs on a board like this ever, and I should be. So this is a great lesson for me here. Now a 6 of hearts comes on the turn. The villain checks, and we bet 11 BBs. Oh yeah, the pot again shows the wrong number. It should show 16.5 BBs because we bet 5 and got called. So we bet 3/4 of the pot here, and the solver would actually prefer checking 48.5% of the time, but betting 3/4 is pretty much the same for him as checking. He does that 43.5% of the time. So this is all fine here. We get called, and now there's another 10 on the river, and the villain checks to us, and I assume we bet, whilst in reality probably we should check. Yeah, as you can see, we bet the pot, and that's a minus 9.4 of EV loss, and the solver never bets here, overbets here. It checks behind 99.98% of the time, and it really makes sense if you look at it. Yeah, we have a good enough hand to check down and realize our equity, and we can't get called by worse. We probably cannot bluff better hands, so betting is just a bad idea. But we bet, we get raised, and we have to fold. So see the next one, ace king off on a queen deuce ace with 2 hearts. The villain checks, we bet 5. That's the ideal action. All good here. We have another queen of diamonds. The villain checks, and we bet 11, which is a little EV loss. So we bet 3/4 of the pot here. And the solver plays it 19% of the time, but it would actually prefer checking. And it would also do that about 18% of the time. So I assume playing a third of the pot bet or overbetting is the preferred action. And probably overbetting here is the preferred action. But we would have to see that result to know. We get called, that's all good, and there's a 3 of diamonds on the river, and the villain checks to us. So I think probably the ideal action would be here checking, but we're gonna bet. Yeah, we're betting here, and that's a minus 3.97 of EV loss, and the solver only plays it a little over a half percent. So yeah, we should be checking here 98.5% of the time, and it really makes sense. Similarly to those other spots, betting here does nothing for us. We will not get called by wars almost ever. We are only blocking ourselves from realizing our equity. So that's probably why the bet is, those bets are so big on EV loss. Yeah, and as you can see, we actually get raised, and well, what can we do? We have to fold. So yeah, King 7 of spades on a 6, 9, 10 with 2 clubs. The villain checks, we check. Betting 5 would be the ideal action, but checking, as you can see, is similarly 0 EV loss and played 47% of the time. We have a 5 of spades now on the turn, and the villain leads for 3/4 of the pot. Let's see what we do here. We call, and it is already a very bad play because we should be folding 99.99% of the time here. Wait. And as you can see, it's a minus 3.61 EV loss, and the solver never plays it here. So yeah, I don't know why I called it here, because when I look at it, it doesn't make too much of a sense. I guess maybe I misread the board. Maybe I thought, I don't know, it's an 8. Well, I don't know. But let's see what happens next here. The villain bets 4 BBs, and we're gonna fold now. So yeah, that's an easy hand. Nothing big here. King Jack of hearts on a 10, 5, 10. Let's see what happens here. We bet 2 BBs, which is the ideal action. All good here. Get raised to 8.5, and I guess we call, which is the bad action, because we should just be folding. Okay, we should not be folding. We should actually be calling this here 98.7% of the time, which is a little bit weird if you ask me. I would think we are folding here at least a decent percent of the time, but no. 6 of spades on the turn, and the villain checks. We check, which is not bad. A very small EV loss, and played the majority of the time, but the ideal action by the solver would actually be betting 8, so a third of the pot, and he would do that a third of the time as well. We have a 9 of hearts on the river. The villain checks. Or maybe we check here, and that's the bad play. Yeah, now it all makes sense. Yeah, it's similar to one of the previous hands. We basically give up on the spot by checking here, and we shouldn't. We should take a stab at it, and we should bet 3/4 of the pot 52% of the time, and either a third or overbet it the remainder 48 almost percent. Checking here, well, the solver does that, but just 0.05% of the time, and it's a minus 5.22 BBs of EV loss. Yeah. So as you can see, this was a great experience playing those 500 hands of this spot. I'm sure I've learned a lot. I hope you did learn something as well watching those spots. This is a cool tool. I recommend you check it out. And if you stayed this long, you can leave a comment with GTO. And thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. And I will see you guys in the next one. We will be playing an MTT spot from now on. I'm not yet sure which spot this will be, but stay tuned and it should be awesome. Thanks.